Ever feel like something's just kind of off? Like you can't quite put your finger on it, you know?
Yeah, that feeling of being stuck, like something's holding you back.
Exactly. It's like maybe you're crushing it at work, closing every deal like Ben does. But then, bam, you've got to give a presentation and
And the anxiety hits.
big time. He says his throat tightens up, his mind goes blank.
He starts thinking he's going to mess up, that everyone's judging him.
Yeah, all this self-doubt, even though objectively he's successful. Or take Stacy.
Stacy's case is interesting.
She's got this constant dread, like a fear of being alone, plus she struggles with eating, and then there are these weird, vivid images that keep flashing in her mind.
Images.
Yeah, like a red color in a candle makes no sense to her.
Those kinds of seemingly random recurring images can be really puzzling.
Totally. So have you, ever felt this way, a negative feeling that just won't quit, some belief that keeps tripping you up, or a behavior you just can't shake?
Even when logically there's no reason for it.
Right, like your life's pretty good, but something's still bugging you.
It's actually more common than people might realize. Even those who seem to have it all together can struggle with these kinds of unseen obstacles.
And that's what we're going to dive into today, specifically for you, the learner. You guys have sent in some seriously fascinating stuff about how our past experiences, even those tiny moments we barely remember, can have the huge impact on how we feel and act right now.
It's like our past is casting a shadow, even if we're not aware of it.
Totally. And we want to get to the bottom of this to figure out what's causing these stuck points, but without getting too technical.
Right, because it's about understanding the core principles.
Absolutely. So, one of the big ideas here is that these ongoing negative emotions and behaviors, they might actually be coming from what are called unprocessed memories.
Ah, yes, those experiences that our brains didn't quite, well, digest properly.
Unprocessed memories. How does that even work? It's not like we're constantly reliving the past in some dramatic way, are we?
Not necessarily, no. It's more subtle than that. The key is how these memories are stored in our brains.
Okay, so walk us through that.
So imagine a processed memory, right? It's like a lesson learned. The intense emotions, the negative beliefs, even physical sensations, they're not stuck in our memory networks, raw and easy to trigger.
So they're not constantly setting off alarm bells in our system.
Exactly. But unprocessed memory, that's a different story. It can cause these knee-jerk reactions to present situations that even slightly resemble that past event. And here's the kicker. We might not even consciously link the two.
It's almost like our brain's on autopilot, defaulting to these old, unresolved experiences.
That's a great way to put it. And today, we're going to explore how this happens and how a therapy called EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing.
EMDR.
It can help tackle these deep-rooted, unprocessed memories.
Got it. So let's talk about Ben, our successful businessman who gets totally freaked out by presentations. He says it's been this way his whole life. He's clearly capable, but then, boom, anxiety hits him.
Yeah, it's classic presentation anxiety, but it's interesting how it contrasts with his professional success.
Totally. He gets sweaty palms, his voice shakes, heart's racing, and these super critical thoughts pop up, like, I'm going to crash and burn. Everyone will think I'm a joke. What jumps out at you about his situation?
It's that disconnect, right, between his actual accomplishments and those automatic negative reactions. It's like even decades later, those same feelings and thoughts from his past are getting triggered by a work presentation.
Even though he might not be consciously remembering, say, a specific embarrassing moment from school.
Exactly. It might not be a clear memory of a failed speech or something, but those intense feelings and negative self-talk, they're there and they're powerful.
So even though he can't pinpoint a specific event, his brain's still reacting as if he's back in that situation.
Precisely. It's become this ingrained response, like a reflex he can't control.
Fascinating. And a little scary, right? Thinking our brains can just get stuck like that. So it's a reaction to a trigger, like you said, public speaking in this case, as predictable as cause and effect. And you mentioned something really important earlier. Everyday stuff like relationship troubles or losing a job.
Oh, yeah?
Those can actually cause similar symptoms to what we think of as classic PTSD. It's kind of blurring the lines of what we consider trauma, isn't it?
It is. It's like our brains can get overloaded and stuck on a whole spectrum of experiences.
Exactly. It's not just those big dramatic events.
Right. Research actually suggests there isn't this neat line between different types of events, and even the symptoms can overlap. We all deal with anxiety, fear, feeling on edge, those intrusive thoughts, maybe guilt, or even disturbing dreams.
We've all been there.
Exactly. And sometimes it's clearly linked to something happening now, and it fades when the situation resolves. But for a lot of people, these feelings hang around, even when there's no obvious reason. That's often a clue that unprocessed memories are at play.
So it's like a hidden influence shaping our present emotions.
Exactly.
So the takeaway here for you, the learner, is that that annoying feeling, that belief that's holding you back, or that behavior you wish you could change, those are likely symptoms, not the root cause of what's bothering you.
Exactly. There's signals that something deeper is going on.
And that something is probably an unprocessed memory that's still messing with you.
Spot on. It's really fascinating how our memories are at the core of both our struggles and our well-being.
Yeah, two sides of the same coin.
It all comes down to how those memories are stored, unprocessed. Well, they can make us overreact, act in ways we later regret.
But when they're processed,
We can respond to things in a healthier, more adaptable way.
yeah.
We'll learn from the past instead of being controlled by it.
Okay, so now let's talk about why some of these stuck points come from sources we might not even suspect. I mean, most of us can understand how a really tough childhood could lead to problems later on. But what about those who had, a decent upbringing and are still struggling? Like Stacy with that constant uneasiness and fear of being abandoned, the eating disorder, and those strange red and candle images.
Yeah, Stacy's experience really shows how complicated this can be. She spent years in therapy, trying different things, but
Not much progress.
not really. It's tough. There's so many types of therapy out there, and each therapist has their own approach, which shapes the whole treatment. Finding the right fit, the right method, it can be a real struggle.
It's almost like trying to find a needle in a haystack sometimes.
It can feel that way for sure.
And in Stacy's case, it sounds like there was a disruption in how her brain dealt with a past event on a fundamental level.
Right. Sometimes, especially with really upsetting childhood events, the brain's ability to process things gets overloaded. And then the memory either isn't stored in a way that's easy to access, or it becomes so fragmented that the person has zero conscious memory of it.
Wow, so it's like the memory's there, but hidden from view.
Exactly.
And that was a big part of Stacy's struggle, right? Not knowing where her anxiety and those other issues were coming from.
It was. And unfortunately, because she couldn't explain the dread, the abandonment fears, the eating disorder, and because she also experienced panic attacks, a previous therapist mistakenly suggested she might have been abused.
Oh, no.
They even linked those red and candle images to some kind of ritual abuse.
That's awful. I mean, that could have made her anxiety even worse, focusing on something that never even happened.
It did. For 2 years, they kept searching for these false memories, but obviously nothing positive came of it.
It's a good reminder that not all therapies are created equal, and sometimes, well, the wrong approach can do more harm than good.
Unfortunately, that's true.
So it wasn't until Stacy found a therapist trained in EMDR that she had a real breakthrough. And since she couldn't remember a specific event related to her symptoms, the therapist decided to target those strange images, the red and the candle.
Because even though they seemed random, they were clearly significant to Stacy.
And those seemingly meaningless images actually unlocked the whole mystery.
They did. Through EMDR, memories from her early childhood started coming up. She saw herself at 5 years old on her birthday. Her dad had given her a scented candle for her room, and then they were driving to her birthday lunch, singing in the car.
Ah, that's so sweet.
I know. But then they were hit by another car that ran a stop sign, and her father was killed.
Oh my gosh, that's heartbreaking. And suddenly everything clicks into place, right?
Yeah.
The eating problems, the fear of abandonment, the anxiety. It all makes sense in light of this horrible tragedy.
Exactly. And the red, well, that was the color of the car that hit them.
And the candle.
That was the scented candle her father had given her right before the accident. It's incredible how our brains can link seemingly insignificant details to traumatic experiences.
Yeah, those details become supercharged with emotion. So we don't always have to experience what we think of as a major trauma to develop lasting symptoms, do we? Like you were saying with Janice and her antacid use.
Right, Janice. She had used antacids excessively for years, to the point where it was hurting her stomach.
Wow, that's serious.
It was. But she couldn't remember when it all started, just that she had this intense fear of being sick to her stomach.
So like a phobia almost.
Exactly. And through EMDR, the root memory surfaced. It was from grade school. The girl next door vomited in class.
Oh, yuck.
Right. And Janice tried to stop it, but it ended up in her hair. The panic, the humiliation, feeling unclean. That's what fueled her antacid dependence all those years. And once she processed that memory, no more need for antacids.
It's amazing how these seemingly small incidents can have such a long-lasting impact. It really shows that it's not just about how objectively bad an event is, but how our system processes it. And you made a really important point about not blaming parents, even if childhood experiences are often at the root of these issues.
That's crucial. Look, childhood is where a lot of this starts, but it's not about pointing fingers. As kids, we're totally dependent on the adults around us, and everyone experiences moments of feeling powerless, ignored, or less important. Later on, we'll dig into why some people develop long-term problems and others don't. But the point is, these things happened when we had very little control. We didn't choose those situations.
Right, we were just kids.
Exactly.
Right.
And our parents, no matter how they raised us, they were shaped by their experiences too.
Their own upbringings, their own baggage.
Exactly. If we were going to play the blame game, it would go back generations. But the good news is, even those deeply ingrained patterns, those negative cycles, they can be broken. As adults, we can understand these things, and that gives us the power to take control and change.
That's such an empowering message. It's not about dwelling on the past, but about understanding it so we can move forward.
That's the goal.
And then there's Joe, who felt completely stuck in his job. Even though he was unhappy, he couldn't bring himself to make a change.
Right, Joe, he felt like he just couldn't go after what he wanted, like he was blocked somehow.
Exactly.
And with EMDR, a seemingly insignificant childhood memory came up. It was about being punished by his mom for chasing after a ball that had rolled down the stairs, even though she told him not to.
It sounds almost funny, you know? Like a kid chasing a ball.
I know, right?
Hmm.
But that one event, being punished for going after something he wanted, it locked in that negative feeling, that belief of, I can't get what I want. And it stayed with him for 30 years.
30 years. That's unbelievable.
It just shows how powerful those early experiences can be.
It really does. And it's so important to remember that struggling with these things, it doesn't mean you're weak.
Absolutely. Even the strongest people, the ones we think of as heroes, they can have these deep internal struggles too.
It's human, right? We all have stuff we're dealing with.
Absolutely. And the first step is recognizing when something's holding us back in life. Then we can start asking, what can I do about it?
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about how memory actually works in all of this. You mentioned sensory input linking to memory networks. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Of course. So think about everything you're experiencing right now. What you see, smell, hear, taste, touch. All that information goes into your working memory.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just sit there in isolation. It automatically links up with this massive network of memories that are already stored in your brain.
It's like our brains are constantly filing things away, connecting the dots between past and present.
Exactly. And that linking process is how we make sense of the world. For example, even the words we're speaking right now.
Right.
You need to connect them to your existing memories to understand what they mean. Every person you meet, every conversation, all your experiences, they're constantly being woven into these established memory networks.
So it's like our brain's always cross-referencing, right? Comparing new information to what we already know, creating context and meaning.
Precisely. It's a continuous process of making connections. And that brings us to EMDR and its accidental discovery. It all started with eye movements.
Okay, tell us about that.
So the person who pioneered EMDR, she noticed something interesting. When she focused on disturbing thoughts and at the same time moved her eyes back and forth, the distress she felt lessened.
Really? Just from moving her eyes?
Yeah, it was totally unexpected. And it got her thinking, especially because she was already interested in how the mind and body connect. She thought maybe there was a link to the rapid eye movements we have during REM sleep.
You know, that dream state where we often process emotions.
Right. Sometimes we wake up feeling better about things after a night of vivid dreaming.
So she thought those deliberate eye movements might be tapping into a similar process, like a way to hack our brain's natural processing system.
Exactly. And over the next few years, she tried this with about 70 people. She found that when they focused on a distressing memory or thought and did these sets of back and forth eye movements.
Like looking left and right, left and right.
Yeah, exactly. Many of them felt less emotional distress.
That's wild. So it actually worked.
It did. And when someone hit a plateau, stopped making progress, she would try variations. Maybe focus on a different part of the memory, change the speed or direction of the eye movements. She kept experimenting until she got consistent results.
So a lot of trial and error in those early days.
For sure. It was a very hands-on process of figuring out what worked best.
And I imagine the established therapy world wasn't too thrilled about this new, untested approach.
You're right, there was a lot of skepticism, which is understandable, right? When something totally new comes along, people are naturally cautious.
They want to see the evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the advisory board members for the Journal of Traumatic Stress, where that first EMDR article was published, he even called the editor, expressing doubts.
He didn't believe it.
Not at first. But here's the thing. This guy was also running a PTSD program for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And he decided to check it out for himself, go to an EMDR training.
Put it to the test.
Exactly. During the training, he used EMDR on one of his own difficult experiences, and he was blown away by the results. So then, he started using it with his patients and became a huge advocate for EMDR.
That's a pretty powerful endorsement coming from someone who was initially skeptical.
It is. It's a testament to how powerful personal experience can be.
So he saw it work firsthand, both for himself and his patients. And since then, the evidence for EMDR has just exploded, right?
It has. Since 1990, there have been over 20 scientifically controlled studies that prove EMDR works for treating trauma and other disturbing life experiences.
Wow, 20 studies. That's a lot of data.
It is. And because of all this research, tons of organizations around the world now recognize EMDR as a legitimate treatment for trauma, including big names like the American Psychiatric Association and the U.S. Department of Defense.
So EMDR has gone from this fringe idea to a mainstream therapy, all thanks to the evidence.
It's a great example of how science can validate new approaches.
And the name of the therapy actually changed as our understanding of it evolved, right? It started as eye movement desensitization.
Right.
But now it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Why'd they add reprocessing?
Well, it reflects a deeper understanding of what EMDR is actually doing. It's not just about turning down the volume on those emotional reactions to a memory.
Like making the feelings less intense.
Exactly. It's about helping the brain to process that memory fully.
So integrating it in a healthy way so it doesn't have that same power over us?
That's it. And we've also learned that it's not just eye movements that work. You can get the same results with other types of bilateral stimulation.
Bilateral stimulation.
What's that?
It basically means stimulating both sides of the body in an alternating rhythm. So like tapping on each hand or knee, one after the other, or listening to tones that alternate between your ears. Interesting. So it's the back and forth motion that's key, not specifically the eye movements.
Exactly.
And there are theories about why this works, right?
Yep. One idea is that this side-to-side stuff constantly shifts our attention back and forth, and that triggers something called an orienting response.
Okay, the orienting response.
Mm.
What's that all about?
It's basically how our brains naturally respond to new or unexpected things in our environment. It helps us focus our attention and figure out what's important.
So like if you hear a loud noise, you automatically turn your head to see what's going on.
Exactly. And researchers think this orienting response might use some of the same brain mechanisms that are active during REM sleep, which is why EMDR can help process those memories.
So it's like tricking our brains into a processing mode even though we're awake.
You got it. Another theory is that when we're focusing on that traumatic memory and doing the bilateral stimulation at the same time, it overloads our working memory.
Working memory. Remind us what that is again.
It's basically that mental space where we hold information while we're actively using it, like when you're trying to remember a phone number or follow directions.
Okay, got it.
So with EMDR, this overload makes it harder for our brains to hold on to those disturbing parts of the memory as strongly as they usually do.
It's like we're disrupting the brain's normal pattern of holding onto those negative emotions.
Exactly. It's like shaking things up a bit, loosening their grip.
So even though we don't know exactly how EMDR works, the fact that it helps people reprocess those stuck memories is pretty well established.
Definitely. The evidence is strong.
Okay, so let's get practical. What does EMDR actually look like? You shared Lynn's story about processing her memory of an earthquake. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So early in the EMDR session, Lynn and her therapist had already picked the specific memory they wanted to work on. It was the experience of hiding in a doorway with her son during the earthquake, with the ground shaking and everything falling around them.
That sounds terrifying.
It was. And they also identified the negative thought that went with it for Lynn, I'm powerless, and the intense anxiety she felt whenever she thought about it, which she rated as an 8 out of 11.
So they were really clear about the target, the image, the negative thought, and how much distress it caused. What happened next?
The therapist then guided Lynn's eyes to move back and forth really quickly for short periods, about 30 seconds at a time. Those are the sets of eye movements or the bilateral stimulation.
And during those sets, what was Lynn supposed to do? Just stare back and forth?
Not exactly. She was told to just notice whatever came to mind and let it happen naturally.
So just be present with her thoughts and feelings as they came up.
Exactly. And even though she was totally conscious and aware, it was like this bilateral stimulation opened up new pathways in her brain. Thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, even other memories. They all started to surface, almost like in a dream.
It's like accessing those hidden parts of the memory that were stuck before.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so after each set of eye movements, what happened?
Lynn was told to let go of those thoughts and feelings and take a deep breath. Then, the therapist would ask her what came up. Her answer would help the therapist guide her focus during the next set of eye movements.
So it was this back and forth process, kind of like a dance between Lynn's brain and the therapist's guidance.
That's a great analogy.
And you said other memories, seemingly unrelated ones, started coming up too.
Yes, that's a common and really important part of EMDR. So as Lynn was processing that earthquake memory, other things started popping up. She remembered her brother telling her a lie that got her hurt. There was a memory of her father touching her inappropriately when she was around 11, and then a childhood illness where she was in a lot of pain, but the adults around her didn't believe her.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. But how did those memories relate to the earthquake? They seem so different.
It's the underlying themes that connected them, the feelings of betrayal, of her reality being shaken,
Okay, I'm starting to see the link.
with her brother's lie and her father's actions. Those were violations of trust, right? And with her childhood illness, her experience, her own reality, was dismissed. And the earthquake, in a similar way, was this huge external event that shattered her sense of safety and control. EMDR allowed her to connect these seemingly separate events through those common emotional threads. It's amazing how our brains can do that, isn't it? Weave together these different experiences when we give them the chance to process.
Yeah, our brains are always looking for patterns and meaning, even if we don't realize it. So, as Lynn kept processing these memories with the eye movements, what happened with her anxiety about the earthquake?
It changed drastically. Her SUDs rating, remember that measure of her distress? It went down significantly. By the end of the session, when the therapist asked her to think about that moment in the doorway, she actually laughed. And she said, well, what occurs to me is, yeah, that was an earthquake.
It's like the memory lost its power over her.
It did. The past didn't feel so present and overwhelming anymore. The earthquake memory was finally stored properly, without all the intense negativity and that feeling of powerlessness.
That's so powerful. EMDR really helped her to heal from that experience on a deep level.
It did. It's remarkable how it can unlock those stuck memories and allow them to be processed in a healthier way.
Okay, so we've talked about how these unprocessed memories can affect us individually, but you also mentioned they can impact our relationships, like with Trudy and Barry's marriage.
Yeah, Trudy and Barry's problems were deeply rooted in their own separate childhoods. Barry had this tendency to be passive and avoid conflict, and that was a direct result of his relationship with his father.
His father was.
Really harsh and critical, very authoritarian. So to avoid pain, Barry learned to just go along with things, try to please his dad. And unfortunately, he carried that pattern into his marriage with Trudy.
So he was unconsciously repeating the same dynamic from his childhood.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Barry's passivity actually fueled Trudy's anger and demands.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It was. Because it triggered her own unprocessed memories of her mother, who never stood up for herself. So even though Trudy and Barry loved each other,
They were both reacting from these old, unhealed wounds without even realizing it.
exactly, their pasts were very much present in their marriage, and it was hurting them.
And this just shows how those unresolved experiences can really mess with our closest relationships, even if we have the best intentions.
Absolutely. It's like we're bringing our baggage into those relationships, and sometimes that baggage collides.
And it's not just early childhood, right? Adult experiences can also create these challenges.
Oh, definitely. While those early years can set the stage, difficult things can happen at any age, and they could definitely throw us off track. Sometimes it's just a buildup of stressful events, like one thing after another until we just can't cope anymore.
You mentioned Meg, who felt super self-conscious all the time.
Right, like everyone was watching and judging her every move. Exactly. And it all stemmed from a seemingly minor incident when she was 13 during one of her first visits with her dad after her parents divorced.
Oh, that's a tough age for a divorce.
It is. So she was excited to see her dad, and he took her to the beach. But she'd never been to the beach before, and she didn't know about sunscreen.
Oh.
Yeah, she got a horrible sunburn.
Yeah.
And that experience, mixed with the divorce and her desire to connect with her dad, it became this core memory that fueled her intense self-consciousness.
It's like that one event became a symbol for all her insecurities.
That's a great way to put it. And it shows that even seemingly small things can become these powerful, unprocessed memories that shape how we feel and act today.
So the takeaway is that our past experiences, even the subtle ones, can have a much bigger impact than we realize. And understanding that connection between past experiences, unprocessed memories, and our current struggles, that's a huge first step toward healing and growth.
It's all about understanding the root of the issue so we can address it effectively.
Exactly. So for you, the learner, let's recap some key points. Those negative feelings and behaviors that are bugging you, they often come from unprocessed memories, even if you don't consciously remember them.
And even seemingly small events can leave a lasting mark.
Right. And EMDR, that therapy we've been talking about, it's proven to help people deal with those underlying memories and tap into the brain's natural healing power.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool for change.
Now, we want you to think about your own experiences. Did any of the examples we talked about resonate with you?
Are there any stuck points in your life, things you haven't been able to shake?
Because being aware of them, that's the first step toward change.
Knowing there are ways to address those unprocessed memories and start feeling better, that's empowering in itself.
It is. And here's a final thought for you to ponder. What if some of your reactions today are actually being driven by those past unprocessed experiences? What new possibilities could open up in your life if those memories were finally healed and integrated? Maybe it's time to explore this further. See if professional help might be right for you.
That's a powerful question to ask yourself, because understanding our past can truly unlock our future.